You know, because I forgot that you're in like Dallas, so there's a lot of people. It's like we need to come together, and it's like you like werewolves, I like werewolves. You like hummus, I like hummus. Let's hug. Look, an apartheid wall just fell. It doesn't actually work that way. So I wrote this poem in response because a lot of times like campus groups are like we just need to like bring people together, and it's like no, we need to come together to fight against injustice. Like I don't care your gender, your sexuality, where you were born. Right? But if you're standing against a system of oppression, I can get down with that. But I can't get down with the way that the word dialogue is co-opted on college campuses today. It's not about dialogue. It's about systems of domination. It's about reaffirming oppression. It's about your right-wing administration or right-wing Israeli groups that are actually just saying, how can we co-opt people to expand settlements? And that's something really messed up. So this is a poem called An Open Letter to Campus Zionist Groups and University Chancellors. I hope you enjoy it. Funnily enough, the chancellors don't like it so much. So when they passed the academic boycott last year, you had more than 100 chancellors across the country come together to condemn it. And I'm going to say it in the poem, like your chancellor doesn't give a damn about Palestine or any other issue. They care about like empty email boxes and donors and fun stuff like that. So. Except for the ones that are actually really right-wing, so that actually does happen too. This conversation is a dialogue. My Facebook post, that comment, back the email chain, the article in response to the article, the soon-to-be Q&A, the debate in the quad, yesterday's phone call. That time I smiled, said hello, and held the door for a member of Bruins for Israel. You know where we can't have any kind of dialogue? In Palestine, because I'm not allowed to return. Because ethnically cleansed Palestinians aren't allowed to return. Because ethnically cleansed Palestinians returning would put ethno-religious supremacy in jeopardy. It's easy to talk about your comfort level when there isn't a checkpoint stopping tonight's event from happening. No wall blocking us from meeting. I don't get to drop white phosphorus on your dorm room and call it security if our chat doesn't go well. So let's have a little thought experiment on your tolerance. Would Hillel, J Street, Olive Tree Initiative, One Voice, and Seeds of Peace come to a meeting to dialogue on whether or not Jews should have equal rights in America, whether or not Jews should be stuffed into internment camps in America, whether or not Jews should face checkpoints before coming onto campus in America? No, they wouldn't want to come to that meeting because it sounds like obscene white supremacist bullshit now, doesn't it? Woo! This situation is about as two-sided as drowning puppies in a bathtub. Israel is the aggressor, the occupier, the ethnic cleanser, and dominating force from the river to the sea. So don't ask me to indulge racism. That is not dialogue. That is not moving things forward. That is the bomb's blast. That is the silence of solitary confinement. The academy in America was built on white supremacy, and I'm not looking to replicate the process. You want a hug over justice? I'll stretch my arms and fingertips so wide my knees buckle. But I saw you read a prepared question off your Android, prepped by Stand With Us, given talking points to derail the discussion. You don't want dialogue. You want domination. Yeah. Yes. And that's not something I can offer you. Most administrations don't care about climate. They care about donors and empty email boxes, houses made of sand willing to crumble at the first sight of rain, overbloated salaries and egos, over-anxious trigger fingers looking to throw as many black and brown bodies under the bus as need be. So Chancellor X, challenge us. Student Council Y, let your backbone fold on itself. Administrator Z, tell me about climate while artillery shells eviscerate natives you never cared to learn about. Because students are coming, and they aren't stopping, cowering, caving to veiled threats, stripped funding, and attacks on their organizations. You made a miscalculation. The road to freedom is not through the academy, but these students, armed with more passion than donor funding lining your pockets, are sure as hell gonna smash your roadblocks. What?
As long as the food lasts.
Yeah, as long as the food lasts, we're good. Okay, so we're gonna do this one. Should we do one more new one? No, we'll do this one, then we'll do, okay, fine. This is called Tone It Down. Now sometimes, like with a poem for Gaza or Before the Machetes Are Raised, there's kind of a lot of layers to the poem. You're reading human rights reports, you're watching videos, you're collecting testimony, and you kind of craft a piece. Other times somebody says something really racist, you're like, wow, that was really racist. I'm gonna write a poem about you. That's this poem. It's called Tone It Down. I was at this cultural center. They had a very big bar at the cultural center. And so 2 very drunk people came up to me like after the show and were basically kind of like, you're so brown and angry.
Oh,
And I was like, you're a white supremacist. I didn't actually say that because they were really drunk. And the only thing worse than being insulted by like 2 really drunk people after you get done with your set is getting punched in your face. Like the second is like getting thrown up by 2 really drunk people who just yelled not nice things in your face. So I wrote this poem about them called Tone It Down. I hope you like it. I hope one day they hear it.
That they get punched.
But I got a nose to watch out for. You like tap this thing and it breaks, so it's like you got to be very careful. Easy target. This is like my 38th show this fall, and I'm very tired. So if I actually like pass out, like you just pick up the phone and you just scream it, and it kind of all sounds the same.
I got you.
has anybody not signed the sign-in sheet?
Please do that.
Anybody need it?
What did he say?
Alright, gotta snap in this poem. Okay. The train comes like often. It's like a New York City subway.
No,
Okay. You should be funny. Tell jokes. Soften your message. Everyone likes humor. You're normal in conversation, but your poems are so angry. Angry. Breathe. Slow down. Cut to platitudes. Neatly fit packages of entertainment to make them laugh. Barack Obama just murdered a wedding party full of Muslims. That mother hunched over her son's dismembered body in Gaza, tore divots into her skin just so she could feel life again. Let me put on a clown costume, sit you on my knee, and tell you a story. One that you could never relate to because your family never went through it. Once upon a time, during the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Once upon a time, birth defects went up 500% in Fallujah. Once upon a time, they beat his body so bad he bled internally, carved a rag head into his bare thigh, and pissed on his wounded flesh. You said nothing. Did nothing. Is that what you want me to say? That you have so little value for human life that I need to put on a clown costume to entertain you? Let you know how this country was founded, who it was founded for, and how we both still benefit off that privilege? No, that's not what you want. You want a funny story. So here's one. Taxpayer £1,000 dollar signs drop on 8-story buildings. Reservations aren't something you make before dinner. Leaflets on your windshield means you may bury the dead by morning. Here's another scream. Refugees die in camps they were pushed into, aren't allowed to leave for chemotherapy. Grandmothers can still feel the rigid earth digging under their feet as they scramble north. Does that make you feel uncomfortable? Like cluster bombs stealing the legs of children in South Lebanon, how much strength does it take to climb atop the world and not give a fuck? No guy that came up to me after the show and asked me why I couldn't be more like the apolitical Jewish comic that came on after me. No, I can't be that guy. And no, you wouldn't be asking me this question if half your family died rushing to get on boats as people fired from behind. This is not a poem. This is a reminder to all drunken dumbasses who come up to me after a show. Slavery isn't funny, feminism isn't angry, and the dumb shit that comes out of your mouth isn't okay just because you ended it with a smile. And if this does make you feel uncomfortable, recognize that there are tens of millions of people who have felt more discomfort due to US policy or dictatorships we've propped up in 3 seconds than you will in a lifetime. Woo! Woo! So, next time you see someone spilling their heart on stage, give them a moment before you try to stomp on it. Recognize that there may be meaning behind words and not every beat is for a finger snap or your personal approval. But if you're really in the mood for some critique, do yourself a favor, look inward and keep that finger pointed and work on your own shit, cause I'd rather be labeled an angry brown poet than an apathetic American who turned away just long enough to never actually have to give a damn. My side is from Jaffa, my father's side is from Haifa, Nazareth, all of which are now part of the undefined borders of the state of Israel. And my grandmother was pregnant with my mom when they were kicked out. And so I have a piece about the Nakba, which literally translates into catastrophe. And it's about, as I said before, the kicking out of 750,000 Palestinians. And this is called Refugee, and it's more about somebody's experience, a Palestinian woman in the West Bank, whose father experienced the Nakba, and she's kind of retelling her story, and also talking about how she has never seen the sea or the village that she's from, because of the way that the Israeli occupation system works, is that you could spend your whole life not actually getting a permit to go 8 miles away from your house into your parents' former village. What time are we here until? Like midnight? No, okay, 1:30. Get barbecue, eat froyo afterwards. Do you have do you put like frozen Snicker bars in froyos? I have this like horrible concept of what Texas and Orlando is. Orlando is like, oh, it's just like the Northeast. No, it's incredibly racist. I don't. That's what yeah. Okay. I got pulled that out. That scared it. One time I got off. The first time I was ever in Orlando, I got off the plane and there was this guy there in like a really, really, really tight American flag polo, and he was just talking about war, and I was like, fuck my life, I gotta get out of here. I was thinking like Mickey Mouse was gonna greet me. That didn't happen. Mickey Mouse is kind of racist. That's another point. Yeah. She's never seen the sea. Sunlight imprinted on her father's skin, waves crashing on his feet, smile tattooed underneath boyish grin, snapping pictures with closing eyelids. Gunfire in the distance, soldiers down the block, heads hanging low, afraid the barrel may turn in their direction. Face flushes on recollection, the same waves that had clenched like an angry jaw as his mother pushed him forward like a train car. Watched his neighbor drown, tears streaming, eyes connecting, screams muffled as inhalation suffocated lungs, muscles weary, skin pruning. Barely a boy, knowing he would never return. An older man, born in Akka, looked dapper at dinner parties, looked helpless that day, terrified, his body revolting against death, a pool intent on swallowing him. So many stroking to get on boats departing, who'd have known this gulf would have been their deathbed? She has been beaten, ID checked, body thrown to the ground, fists and feet pummeled, tender flesh, shoulder broken, heart too many times, tear gas inscribed on her lungs. She wrote back on her breath that the canister's defeat is near. These hills are ours, she told me. Before the Europeans and Brooklynites, before the swimming pools, army jeeps, and barbed wire, before the talks, roadmaps, and Swiss cheese plans, before declarations rewrote history, those hills met footprints, and that can't be erased. Like village massacres can't be erased. Like broken bones policies can't be erased. Like the screams ringing in her father's ears can't be erased. We're the boat returning to dock. We're the footprints on the northern trail. We're the iron coloring the soil. We cannot be erased. Nothing is normal about occupation. Nothing normal about apartheid, ethnic cleansing, siege, blockade, settler-only roads, bombing water wells, schools, mosques, and UN buildings. Nothing normal about putting a civilian population on a diet, paying non-indigenous people to settle land that is already populated, rewriting the Nakba with each stolen childhood, trying to desensitize the bullet holes and claw marks put into the bodies of Bassem Abu-Rahmeh and Rachel Corrie. No, I don't want to normalize with you. I don't want to hug, have coffee, talk it out, break bread, sit around the campfire, eat s'mores, and gush about how we're all the same. I don't want to share the stage, co-write a poem, submit to your anthology, talk about how art, instead of justice, can forge a better path. I don't want to indulge your amnesia about a glorious past, have a therapy session on two sides with equal grievances. The only thing barren is your moral capacity. Blooming a settler colonial state with appropriated culture, I will not fight for your privilege, nor will I seek to normalize it. Your dialogue group, it's a breeding ground for injustice. Just look at the board members and the ZOA sponsorship. Zionism is a real demographic threat, infecting the minds of millions with racism. They were hooded in the South, pushing darker nations into Bantustans, jailing young men in H blocks in Northern Ireland. In case you missed the hint, I don't want to pretend all is okay, or that bombs dropped on Gaza don't have a manufacturer, the pilot doesn't have a nationality, or somehow Shimon Peres is any different than Avigdor Lieberman. It's not just the occupation, stupid. It's the right of return, equality for all Palestinians. It's a transformation from a racist, exclusivist, supremacist state to a nation for all of its citizens. You deserve nothing more than equality, which means more than African refugees are provided in South Tel Aviv. You are the shining light on a settlement hill, reminding the world that racism often comes in nice packaging. Guess what? We don't give the Sudan $3.4 billion a year in military aid, don't have preferential trade agreements with North Korea, don't call Iran a democracy. Israel, you're a proxy for empire, a 1950s ethnocracy trapped in 21st century clothing. Yes, you're singled out with aid, weapons, and UN vetoes in your favor. Did I hurt your feelings? Should we hug after the show? Do these words hurt more than, I don't know, bombs dropped on Gaza, white phosphorus eating the flesh of children? I am not the bad guy. You're defending the bad system. Your words and actions have consequences. You're either with oppression or you're against it. I didn't write history, and sure as hell didn't choose for you to stand on the wrong side of it. Your system of oppression, it is coming to an end. And whether you recognize it or not yet, it'll be liberating for you too. He lifted up his shirt, showed me 2 bullets that pierced his shoulder, lifted up his pant leg, showed me where a tear gas canister shattered his kneecap. Never touched a gun or picked up a rock. His loud voice, more powerful than any cannon. This was written a while back. There was an Israeli who was held captive in Gaza, and it kind of speaks to that. In Gaza, an Israeli soldier remains in prison. The world knows his name and the conditions to set him free. 7,700 Palestinians wallow in Israeli dungeons. The world cannot mention their names because it never bothered to learn them. The soldier stroked his gun as he looked at the young girl, assaulted her with his eyes, occupied every part of her being. She said nothing, stared at the ground, and kept walking. One more checkpoint until she's home. And I'll end with these few. For anybody that during the massacre on Lebanon in Gaza in 2006, in Lebanon where more than 1,000 people were killed, there was an iconic photo that came out of 2 little Israeli girls that were writing on missiles, and they were writing the message with love. And those missiles were then used on the civilian population of Lebanon. And this is the 3-liner that I wrote in response. Missiles said, with love. I fall to where they hit. Charred limbs, stained tears, rotting corpses. No love in sight. In these last two. A pregnant woman dies at a checkpoint. Sometimes a hand in the face is as powerful as a pistol. And the last one. She closes her eyes, smells the sea salt, takes in a deep breath, and feels the wind hug her arms as her father once did. For a split second, she imagines they've returned where she was born, where she belongs. The academic, religious, and cultural institutions called for a comprehensive boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the state of Israel until it complied with three basic demands. Number one was ending the occupation of all Arab land. So millions of Palestinians continue to live under direct military occupation. You have the Golan Heights that remains occupied and so forth. Number two, the right of return for Palestinian refugees, 750,000 who were ethnically cleansed from 1947 to 1949, including the destruction of 531 villages, and waves of ethnic cleansing that have taken place throughout. And number three, equality for all Palestinians living inside of the state of Israel, who face more than 50 laws that systematically discriminate against them in terms of labor, education, marriage rights, and so forth. To give one example of one of the 50 plus repressive laws, let's say you're a Palestinian living in Nablus, which is in the occupied West Bank, and you marry a Palestinian living in Haifa, which is now inside of the state of Israel. You can't unify with your spouse in Haifa simply because you're Palestinian, i.e. not Jewish. Now, when Israeli lawmakers talk about this, they've been more candid over recent years and said this is about a demographic reality. So in the beginning, it was a temporary order that was put in place that was for security reasons. But recent lawmakers have said this is about a demographic reality or a demographic threat. And what that basically means is too many Palestinian babies, too many Palestinians that are watering down the pureness of the Israeli state. So indigenous folks don't really like that so much, right? So to give you an example of what divestment is, let's say you go to North Texas or you go to UTD or you live in Austin and your university invests in Caterpillar. Now Caterpillar sends over armored and D9 militarized bulldozers to the Israeli state. They are used to bulldoze Palestinian homes to Muslim male, right? And it's something that happened long before to the black and Latino male, and before that to the indigenous male. And there's this kind of concept where, you know, if 17 people die in Afghanistan tomorrow, it's not really a big deal because they were in the Taliban, or they were friends with the Taliban. Or one time they saw this YouTube video and it said Taliban on it, so we bombed the living hell out of their village, killed 17 people, and whittled them down to best case scenario statistics and numbers. And when you can do that, it is so much easier to drop that bomb, to pull that trigger, to occupy that village. And when speaking about Palestine or drones or U.S. militarism in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia, we don't have to go overseas to see militarism in action, right? With the killing of Mike Brown and the brutalization of the Ferguson community, the choking to death of Eric Gardner, the killing of Bernicia McBride and Ayanna Jones, racist drug laws, mandatory minimums, 2.3 million people in jail and prison, 5 million wrapped up within the parole system. I live in New York City under Mike Bloomberg. 5 million people were stopped and frisked, the vast majority of them black and Latino. Or being in Dallas and going down to Austin toward the U.S.-Mexico border and looking at 2 million undocumented people kicked out over the last 6 years, millions more on the U.S.-Mexico border, or talking about transphobia and homophobia in our local communities or sexual violence on college campuses. What binds socially conscious people together is working against systems of injustice. So for me, Palestine isn't about a nation state or a people, but it's about a system of oppression, and it's to say that no one should live under apartheid, no one should live under occupation, no one should see their families ethnically cleansed. And so this kind of speaks to that, and I realize that there's the other side of the spectrum of like who are the voices that are centered in these conversations, in the dismissing of people of color and black women's voices or trans voices in this conversation. But this piece, Before the Machetes Are Raised, was written in a very specific context in a post 9/11 Islamophobic, anti-Arab kind of space. So this is called Before the Machetes Are Raised. And I won't do like 15-minute interludes for all the poems. Or I'll get through like 3 poems on the set list. And I really want to thank the organizers, the list of organizers that co-sponsored tonight, and particularly this venue. It is beautiful and amazing. Sometimes I connect with universities and it's just like an SJP, or it's just, you know, like, but it's like if we're also not thinking about the prison industrial complex, if we're not also thinking about what's going on in our backyards, what kind of organizing and activism are we really doing? So this is a beautiful night to be a part of and a beautiful space to be in. I'm disgusted by terrorism. Backwards animals who have no value for human life produce propaganda videos to disseminate their message, prey on the weakest in society, infect children, recruit fighters like expendable ants in the ideological struggle. You know who I'm talking about. Soldiers who drop bunker-busting bombs on mosques and universities, decry the Middle East, but follow authority closer than dictatorial rule, think stripes and codes rather than decency and humanity give them worth in this world. I've seen one too many Facebook invites by jingoistic kids I went to high school and grade school with. They couldn't wait to get in some trigger time, hunt down towel heads and hajis like venison. And when some Marine's grenade launcher catapults 120 mini bombs per minute, takes out 17 houses and 14 schoolgirls, I'm supposed to feel bad that he can't see his wife and daughter on Christmas. Respect his service. When he comes back to the States, a murderer who destroyed a country full of daughters and wives that'll never see Eid. We're so quick to honor the troops, but don't dare mention the widows. The trembling father crying immersed in his wife's charred flesh, a fetus blown out of her stomach. The soldier said, kicking down the door was too risky. Where's the love for the 25-year-old Iraqi man whose car was riddled with American-made bullets, pain face and surprised look like grabbing for sky, falling out of 110-story towers? As long as we don't affect our interests, we'll shout out Darfur, Rwanda, and the need for antiretrovirals. Look at human beings as aid packages who can't compete, rather than ravaged lands perfecting paradigms of imperialism and propaganda. Where is that right-wing Zionist trying to save the Congo, combating Lev Leviev in Angola, genocide in northern Uganda? Where's the humanity before the machetes are raised and proxy forces put into place? King, Mandela, and Gandhi aren't meant to be easy reference platitudes to make you feel better at night, help you forget that uncomfortable poem Americans don't want to face. We'll worship American idols, but have no value for human life. And yet, all I hear are 20-somethings telling me they just aren't in the politics. I wonder what they'd say at their parents' eulogy. After they were blown up into 386 different pieces, I'm sure they wouldn't discuss things, because politics, it isn't their thing. Politics isn't our thing. While we reach out for freedom and justice, we're defined as political to undermine our suffering, create notions of two sides and equal conflict, cover up our dispossession and burn down villages. We're political. See, it can ignore us, delegitimize and forget us. But we're human beings gracing the window pane, reflecting stillborn images. We're voices chiming in choirs and temples. We're life that won't be forgotten. We're here. And we won't go away. We're the world's shiver. It's cold out here. And whether you recognize it or not, we're coming inside. Because, you know, like my book that's over there, it doesn't have any swears in it, you know? And I like developed a potty mouth since the last book came out. So we gotta figure out what's going on for the next book. You know, because sometimes like 12-year-olds like listen to your work and they're like, well, I can't say those words at home, and I was like,
12-year-olds have heard it.
and you, exactly, you know. Tell a parent that. Doesn't go over so well. So okay, no, this poem's called "You Are Not That Badass." Is anybody on Twitter? Okay, so you'll get this. There are a lot of like really cool and awesome and radical and interesting conversations that are going on Twitter, and then there are terrible human beings that are on Twitter. So this is about them, and I hope it's not about you. But like more, I mean, you'll get it. It's like the people that are talking about like the Twitter revolution in Egypt, and it's like all the Egyptians I knew, like most of them were on Twitter in 2011. And this is more like, so I believe in utilizing Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, and a lot of brilliant people do, and a lot of critical conversations happen. But like this is more about like the, Twitter revolutionary, like living in their parents' basement. You'll get who I'm talking about. Sorry for all the S words I'm about to say. It's like a whole stanza of them. Okay. Fine, I want more water anyway. Okay. You are not that badass. You are not so cool because, hey, thank you. Third time is a charm. It's okay. I wanted more water. Okay. Let me not step on stuff. Okay. You are not that badass. You are not so cool because you regurgitate Frantz Fanon behind a computer screen. You read the same 2 books everyone else did. It is noticeable. Stop it. You are not above the petty bullshit. If you are tweeting, I am above the petty bullshit. If you were, you'd probably stop Twitter policing everyone and start working on non-petty bullshit. If you say things like, I don't tweet for followers, you probably tweet for followers. It is obvious. Stop it. You are not an expert on everything. I get that you vacation for 2 weeks in Egypt, love falafel, and have your very own Huffington Post blog account with 7 million other people, but that is not expertise or due diligence. Okay, this one's for you. If you can't point to the country you are tweeting about on a map, you should probably STFU. Not everything is Iraq. Not everything is Palestine. The only thing that is Nazi Germany is Nazi Germany. Stop with the comparisons, white guy shouting at a demo. You are being unhelpful. And if you think I'm an a-hole by the end of this poem, it's probably true, because this is technically a I'm above the petty bullshit poem. But seriously, I am. Critiquing shouldn't become the goal. A game, a life like Candy Crush and Angry Birds and other games I'm not cool enough to know about. Twitter has never been and will never be the revolution. Yes, I tweeted a few times about Miley Cyrus twerking, or her lack of twerking, or her awkward racism, or why so few people initially focused on how creepy Robin Thicke is. See, there, I said it. But at some point, we have to recognize our rubbernecking is slowing down traffic. Movements move. Activists extend beyond 140 characters. We are not the main characters. We're in the belly of the beast. Woo! Many of us challenging empire with privilege. So stop wearing your intellectual sunglasses at night and build beyond the next soundbite. Appreciate that what we say and do and how we say and do it matters. The best critic isn't simply the one wagging the finger the hardest. Yoda was chill. You should try to be more like him. I'm gonna end this poem now. You should totally follow me on Twitter.